arms towards the sun. You feel the warmth of the rays, and then you know you're alive and you don't have to be afraid.
Welcome to the Bassline, everyone. I was introduced to Marc Girardot by my friend Jean Baudouin, author of The Real CDC, who was my guest on the Bassline episode 38. Marc Girardot's work is somewhat similar to John's, but uses an entirely different methodology. Trained in business, he brings a background in biotech, systems analysis, and complex problem solving. Today, Marc is going to give us an overview of what has transpired in France over the last 4 years. He is also going to describe his unique theory, which provides an insight into the mechanisms by which COVID vaccine harm has been inflicted. On the line, all the way from France, we have the magnificent Marc Girardot. Good morning to me and good afternoon to you, Marc. How are you today? Thank you for joining us on the Bassline.
Thank you for hosting me, Jeremiah. It's an honor.
It's an honor for me. Well, my pleasure. I want to say quickly to our audience, this is a pre-recorded show. Once again, things are still getting situated at the PRN studio. I believe we'll be back to live programming in September, because as of now, I am working this summer. And even though I think the studio will be available hopefully as soon as next week, I'm actually somewhat busy this summer, so the pre-recorded show model actually will work pretty well until the end of this month at least. But that being said, we have another great guest lined up. Last week, of course, was our 1-year anniversary program. So please share links to that episode and all the previous episodes. Go get caught up on your missing programs of the Bassline, the ones you haven't heard yet. Please follow me on Twitter. Please join the conversation over there. There are Twitter spaces. You can actually meet people involved in the medical freedom movement who have been on this program, and you can ask them questions and join them in Twitter spaces and send them words of encouragement and retweet their tweets and all of that stuff. So I do suggest there are some good connections to be made on Twitter. Please subscribe to my Substack. Please check out my latest article, Radio Silence. I have a new one that should be available in a matter of days. Please check out Marc Girardot's Substack as well. He has a phenomenal Substack. You spell his last name, by the way, Girardot, Girardot. Do not pronounce the T if I'm not mistaken. JeremiahHosea.com. That's where you can check out my music, like the theme song of this show. Every means of supporting this show is greatly appreciated. As I've stated, the reason why these programs are being produced is explicitly to educate the public. So I'd like that to be larger and larger swaths of the public until the vast public is educated in this subject matter, or at least to begin with understands they have a right to inquire into these matters, and there's nothing, and certainly nothing pertaining to our health, that should be off limits in terms of the questions that we should ask and the concerns that we may have. But let's get right into this subject with this phenomenal guest that we have here. I would love for you, Marc, to, if you could, just take your time and paint a picture in terms of what you've experienced in France under the COVID regime, because I've always had an image of the French being rebellious people. I'm a big fan, I'm not sure if I've mentioned on this program, I'm a big fan of the French Situationists and their philosophical writings. And I'm a big fan of the author Guy Debord. I believe his book, Society of the Spectacle, is just some of the greatest political philosophy ever written. And in general, I enjoy French philosophy. My family's actually in France, as Marc knows. My family is in France on vacation while I'm on staycation, teaching chess and playing bass in the New York City area. But if you could just take the time to sort of paint a picture of French society, how it changed. I know you're very experienced in terms of you lived in many different places in the world. Your professional work has taken you many places. You're a very worldly man in that respect. So you'd be more qualified than anyone I could think of to describe what the Sitlakite was, what the milieu was in France at that time. And one thing that surprised me, I remember seeing images of people being locked out of grocery stores, protesting outside of the grocery store because they were denied access for lack of a vaccine passport. I think that's what was happening. I don't know if it ever got to that extent. In the US, of course, we weren't allowed to go to a movie theater or go to a restaurant. Many people couldn't return to work. I was one of those people. I couldn't return to my job of 20 years because I couldn't produce my vaccine passport. I'm a musician. I wasn't allowed to perform in venues. I mean, I found that to be completely unfair. It's like, you think I can't just get on stage, play bass, and leave without making anyone sick? I wanted to come out with a new T-shirt line just saying "I'm not sick" would be the clothing company and the logo. You could present it wherever you go. I'm not sick. I don't need a medical intervention. Don't tell me to wear a mask because I have nothing to protect you from. I feel okay. I feel fine. Don't fear me. I'm not a biohazard. So please tell us, Mark, what was it like in France, and take us all the way up till today? How have things changed? Have things shaped up a little bit? Have things gotten better? The floor is yours.
Um, it was a very, very strange time. I mean, that was now more than 4 years ago, this whole thing started. The first few weeks were sort of reasonable. I mean, I think Macron, originally didn't want to shut down the borders. But I think some forces took over at one point, and one force that was extremely big, which is fear. Um, Fear was built by the media, just like everybody, everywhere else. Um, and I do believe that there was this collective dystopia, that people were collectively fearful. And that can't, I mean, as a society, we cannot live in fear. I mean, we can't live together and fear each other. It makes no sense. So France was, I think, on the most of the measures were very similar. They were asking masks. They had this totally stupid self-writing your own authorization to go out for an hour's walk or to go and buy stuff. It was ridiculous, especially for the French. I mean, who are Latin and who probably you would have several of those. But I think what was more more dangerous, there's two things. One, the media continued to hammer, and they continue to this day, like a machine. And I'm seeing it in France. I've seen it across the world. That's not normal. Something's pushing that. The other aspect is they passed laws and they passed measures, exceptional measures, and literally, for example, they had supposedly a scientific committee that was under secrecy. So it was like state secrets what they were discussing. As you were saying, health should be about transparency. It should not be about hiding things. So I typically haven't done much politics around all of that. But I do think France has been extremely anti-democratic in its response, and today is one of the rare countries that's holding the media has shut down everything in a quite incredible way. I mean, you see in Germany, you see the RKI file coming out. There are some, in the UK, many things came out in the media. Nothing came out in the media in France. Nothing.
Wow. Well, let me ask you to follow up on this. In the United States in particular, one thing that I continue to point out, because I feel like it sort of got lost in almost a little Twilight Zone, sort of a wormhole or something, is that there were many, uh, at least a few interviews in which Joe Biden, as well as Kamala Harris, independent of Biden, as well as Nancy Pelosi, independent of Biden, as well as Anthony Fauci, independent of Biden and Harris and Pelosi, they all said that the vaccines would not and could not be mandated. I noticed a lot of there was different waves where people were speaking almost in facsimile, like, wait, who told those four people to make that almost identical
Yeah,
statement
yeah.
in concurrence? But they said plainly, well, we wouldn't mandate a vaccine, and we can't. They said we can't. We don't have the power to do that. And then they turned around in a couple of months and exactly mandated it, and didn't even bother to go back and say, well, we looked at the laws and there is a stipulation, or they didn't feel the need to explain themselves at all.
Yeah.
So in contrast to that, and then I just, I'm not going to get into my whole cosmology around the subject, but I will never, ever, as long as I live, I don't think, fully comprehend how people thought they were protesting Donald Trump by taking his experimental vaccines. It's just like, I hate Donald Trump. Now let him sign his signature in my bloodstream. You know,
Yeah.
um, I didn't understand how, and likewise to a lesser extent, maybe I would say, but I also don't understand at all. On the other hand, how people think that it's they're anti-vax, they're anti-COVID vax, yet they are unquestioning in their support for Donald Trump and his role in the whole thing, as Operation Warp Speed was under his administration. But I just mean it relative to that, how in France, how are the mandates rolled out? Was it just we're going to need mandates soon, or was it surprising? Did they use the element of surprise? What was the communication around that?
It was the same thing. I think they read the same playbook. Let's be very. They were fed the same playbook.
Mm,
It was sometimes, it was sometimes executed with a different timeline, but I think um, they were fed the same playbook. I what was really surprising in my book in the Needle Secret, the first part of the book is a bit on that, and it's more importantly is it's about rationality. I think here some of us kept their rationality where the rest of the world didn't. And I think I, having had worked in vaccine technology prior to COVID, um, I knew from day one that the vaccines could not work. I knew from day one that they were not needed, right?
mm,
But they would not work. They would not work for the target. They would not work for the target who were dying or suffering severe COVID, right? And here the pharma did one of those magic tricks, or the community, the public health community, because fundamentally they started this by saying, well, your parents or your grandparents are going to die of this terrible disease. We need to vaccinate them, right? And at one point they shifted the pointer, and they start scaring people on the kids. That happened very quickly. Um, but the kids were never in danger. I mean, they started in May, June. I remember May, June, July 2020. I was like, the kids are not suffering. There's no data that the kids are suffering. But you could see that the narrative was shifting to that. They were panicking mothers on their children to prepare for the vaccine. And when the vaccine arrived, they told us, oh yeah, but a vaccine can't be 100% effective. And I'm like, well, so it's leaving aside basically the target. You see the magic trick?
yeah.
It's really what magicians do. They point you
Sleight of
somewhere
hand.
else. Exactly. Um, so what for me, this whole vaccines were always a medical procedure. having worked in the field.
An invasive medical procedure. I mean, some people
uh,
laughed at that, but by all means, an invasive medical procedure.
highly invasive. If people knew what they are injecting themselves. So let's get back let's get to the basic of it.
Right. So,
Every
by the way, this is sort of question number two, by the way, which is just Mark has a phenomenal theory, basically, that we're gonna basically introduce to the Bassline audience here, and I'm so excited for this because, with every guest on this program, it's like there are different puzzle pieces that are sort of put on the table, and here we have some really big puzzle pieces. I do believe Mark has taken a lot of time researching this. He's an all-around bright guy, like I said, a background in complex problem solving, similar to our previous guest, Ivor Cummins. And he's just entering this conversation from a totally different angle than what we've heard up until now. And one thing that I've emphasized over and over again, as we were told, safe and effective, don't worry about a thing, just go get yourself injected, go get your family injected, go get your newborn child injected. There's so many things that can go wrong, logically speaking, guys. And that's why, and as much as, and I'm not going to get into the whole conspiracy theory thing, but I've said many times, listen, there's nothing wrong with being a conspiracy theorist, frankly, because conspiracies happen. We don't know what's going on, and we are left to theorize as to what on earth just happened, like the attempted assassination against the previous president. People don't know what happened, so we have to theorize. Don't deride people for theorizing, for being curious, for wondering what's going on, for being suspicious. We have a right to be suspicious. We have a right to be distrustful. But fundamentally speaking, you have research and development. You have clinical trials. You have the manufacturing of a product. You have the distribution of a product. You have, and here's where we get into some key new information and ideas about that next part, which is the administration of a product. There was not much discussion about that. There was discussion, I remember, introduced by Dr. John Campbell, who was talking about aspirating the needle, which is something I hadn't heard of before, which is an interesting thing. So, the physical administration of the needle can really affect the outcome, which doesn't go well with the fact that you had people just playing nurse. I don't know the means by which these people were hired, but you had people just playing nurse at pop-up locations around New York City, for example. Go get your vaccine outside of the subway. Little rat just ran by your foot. Now go get your vaccine. So the question of the physical administration of the product, and then actually the layer beyond that is how it reacts within the individual's body, right? Everyone is different. So get into what we call the bolus theory.
Yeah, I first I want your audience to understand one thing.
Please.
If they knew what they're injecting, what it does, the mechanism of action of these vaccines, and the size of the dose, they would never have injected it in themselves and in the children. Why? Because the Pfizer vaccine is the most reasonable one. So I'll just stick to that one. The other ones are 4 to 5 times bigger. But the Pfizer vaccine is 10 billion nanoparticles that each have the power to tell your immune system to kill one cell. Okay, so I repeat, imagine that's probably like has the capacity of skinning you alive 20 times entirely, 20 times. That's the power of destruction of this vaccine. Okay, so it is in itself poisonous, and so it has to be delivered appropriately according to protocol and by people who know what they're doing, because of it's like a nuclear bomb. Okay, now that's the I want people to understand. If we had told, if the public health authorities if the media had told, this is what these vaccines do, they, these particles penetrate your cells, they signal to the immune system that to attack that cells, and that cell is going to get destroyed, and you've got 10 billion of them, nobody would have taken them. Okay, that's a fact. Now, the work I have done is an investigation to try and understand why people are harmed. And most importantly, why some people are harmed and some others aren't. I tested that on, fundamentally my second boy, who's 28, had the vaccine for professional reasons, and he was overworked. He was launching a restaurant in Paris. He was working probably 80 hours or 90 hours a week. And at one point, he didn't feel well. And he said, "Dad, do you think it's the vaccine?" I had him tested. And if the vaccine harms you in your blood work, it's visible. You have huge inflammation markers. You have D-dimers that are markers of harm and coagulation cascades that have happened in your vascular system. He had none. He was pristine. So I said, "Okay, you're fine. You're just tired, And I took that to the bank. If I say, I really said, okay, first of all, I was real happy for my son, because you imagine. But then I realized that, okay, so some people are being harmed, some people aren't. Now, that's when I started looking into the delivery technique and why there has got to be a difference in the delivery technique. Why? Because the doses they are giving us are so small, and even though I told you they're big in number, they're actually relatively small. They're tested for that. And when you compare them with venom, for example, with bee venom, they're actually much smaller. Pfizer is like, in weight, is like 5 times less than a bee sting. Okay, so it's normally we've known since 2, 3, 4,000 years that we can take small doses of poison and ingest them. There's this, I wrote an article recently called the Mithridates conundrum. They're, kings who are afraid of being poisoned were taking small doses of poison and ingesting them, and they were fine. So that's the dynamic of the dose is important. What kills you, what harms you, what makes a product a poison is dose. We forgot about it. Nobody's talking about it. But it is dose. So indeed, when you start looking into the hypotheses that somehow some people are getting a delivery that's different, and therefore some must be having a bigger dose intravenously, or a small dose that's going to a critical area. Now, just so your audience understand, a square millimeter is enough to damaged artery in your brain is enough to kickstart an aneurysm and you'll die, or kickstart a leak in an artery and kill you. Okay, that's 1,000 cells destroyed, right? So 1,000 nanoparticles have the power to kill you if they go and reach a sensitive area. And we're injecting organ failure. And so and they're injecting you with 10 billion of them. Okay, we're talking. You could multiply that by a million, by basically 10 million. Okay, 1,000 is enough to harm you, but they're injecting you 10 million times more. And wow. and how do you control that? So I went on and I demonstrated in the Needle Secret, my book, to to discover something that was a very big surprise to me. When I first interrogated doctors, they were telling me, "Oh, Mark, you get an IV injection only one time out of 10,000." Okay? What I have found is that every single shot goes IV, 100%. Let me tell you why. And there's several studies. There's one study by Burgin et al. In Israel, in Switzerland, another one by Nakaha et al. Both are showing that every single dose is harming the capillaries in the heart, which means every single dose is going IV because you need to have a concentrated attack. What I discovered is basic physics, and I don't know why nobody's thought about it, but if you've gone to, for example, that exhibition on the bodies where they show capillaries that had been frozen, of bodies frozen into some kind of wax or something, or some kind of polymer, you see that muscles are filled with capillaries. So when you're inserting a needle, it's not, you're certain 100% that you're going to cut through a big a number of them. Some very small ones, some larger ones. But remember, the diameter of your needle is 1 millimeter.
Right.
So it's tiny. So if you cut a 1 millimeter artery close by, you can push into that capillary or into that venule a huge amount. And what's happening is you don't need to be inserted. What people have been, and including myself, we framed ourselves to think that the only way you can inject intravenously is by having a needle inserted into a blood vessel. You don't need that. It's not true. If you cut the vessel and you pursue the insertion of the needle, when you're going to inject the liquid into the muscle, it's fluid. So fluid dynamics means that there's going to be a sort of a expansion zone of the vaccine, and if ever the venule that's cut is within that reach, some of it's going to go into it. Okay, it's mathematical. You can actually, both in the book and in my article on Substack, I actually calculated the length of the bolus that you're sending and the quantity you're sending, and even in a 50 micrometer vessel, you're going to send millions of particles, millions, and that's a certainty. Once you understand that, it's a domino effect. Why? Because doctors know full well what happens when you inject directly into a vein. You create a bolus. That's why my theory is called the bolus theory. You create a high density group of particles that goes, tumbling down your vascular system and hitting the linings on the side and penetrating that lining. But it's doing it in a highly concentrated way, which is not normal. Normally, you would hit a vessel every foot or something. Now, you've multiplied the risk by 4,000 times. Your concentration, when it goes directly intravenously, is 300,000 times higher, right? And it's going to carpet bomb the inside of your blood vessel, and then your immune system is going to react to that, and your T cells are simply going to strip away layers, the entire layer of your endothelium, which is the layer that triggers coagulation. And so you're going to have, you have all sorts of scenarios, all sorts of severities, and all sorts of of sensitivity, because of course if you do that in the muscle, it's not too, or fat, it's not life-threatening. But if you do that in the brain, in the stem brain, or if you do it in the heart, you're going to kill that person very, very quickly. So you know that for sure. All those steps are certainties. The intravenous injection is a certainty. The bolus is a certainty. The concentrated transfection, penetration, is a certainty. And the destruction by the immune system is a certainty. It's actually the mechanism of action of the vaccine. Once you understand that, and you test the theory, which is if you test on animals to inject the vaccine directly into a vein, see the results. And there's 2 studies that have shown that the exact same results. There's one study in Hong Kong that was published I think in August 2021. There's another one in Munich, Germany, with the AstraZeneca vaccine, and they found very similar, the same adverse events. The Pfizer showed harm to the heart. It's not even myocarditis. It's actually necrosis. It's calcification of the heart. The mouse hearts were calcified in less than 24 hours. They showed necrosis to the liver also. They showed thrombosis and thrombocytopenia. So that's a very important part of a theory, is when it's reproducible, right? It's reproducible. It's actually reproducible on a man. There's a poor little boy called Milo Edberg who was injected directly into his blood port, and he suffered myocarditis and major problems with his lungs. He was in a coma for a month and a half, I think. I think he was partially paralyzed for some time. So there is full reproducibility of my theory. Now, the theory explains all the adverse events, and one of the there's 2 major elements or blocks that are very important. One is the fact that when that occurs in the capillaries, in the organs, and the systems, it often is fragmented, right? So it's going to be cluster bombing the thing and creating leaks. You're going to have vascular leakage, and I call it microperforation. What that does, it destroys the blood tissue barriers. So the blood tissue barriers functions are now destroyed, and so you're going to have elements from the blood that are not supposed to enter that are entering organs. That's the cause of all neurodegenerative disease. Alzheimer's, Parkinson's are caused by a leaky blood-brain barrier. This myocarditis and pericarditis are also about capillary leakage in the heart, but you can have the same capillary leakage in the intestine, and you'll have celiac disease or Crohn's disease or leaky gut disease. You can have it in other areas where you can have neuropathies, etc. So that's a big discovery, because the same conceptual microperforation of the blood vessel explains a huge number of illnesses, including the most of the endocrine disorders that are tied to overexpression of an hormone. Because if your capillary is no longer retaining the hormone in the gland that's producing it, sure, your body thinks, or your doctor thinks, you're overproducing. You're not overproducing. You're simply over-releasing, because everything that you're producing is being released. Right.
Not being contained.
It's not being contained. And that's fixable, by the way. And I'll tell you about it through oxygen therapy. So that's a big part of my discovery. It's a very, and it's demonstrating over and over and over again. The other part, which was a mystery to me for some time, was cancer. Because I consider that all the cells that are penetrated by the vaccines are being destroyed by the immune system. I trust the immune system's work. The immune system is extremely effective in destroying viruses and contaminated cells. I had forgotten, and it came back to me about 18 months ago. I had forgotten that there are a certain type of cells that are not destroyed by the immune system. They're called immune privileged. They're immune privileged because they're too precious to our genetic capital, to our life, to be destroyed and scuttled like the normal cells. And these cells are stem cells.
Mm.
And I started investigating and saying, okay, well, if indeed some of these folks are getting cancer triggered by these vaccines or any other vaccines, by the way, or then it can only be stem cells, because only stem cells will survive, right? The other cells are destroyed within 5-6 days. They're gone. Those vaccine, they're gone. So if there is if there's damage that's genetic, that you've tinkered with a cell, and that cell survives, that cell can only be stem cell. It's logical. It's the only one that are surviving. And so that got me scared. I said, okay, well, have virologists or have vaccinologists thought this through? Have they thought that particles could actually penetrate stem cells? Now, stem cells are hidden away. They're hidden away in our bone marrow. They're hidden away in the in niches of our blood lining, our capillaries. They're hidden away, and they're so hidden away that they have a different fueling system. They can't depend on oxygen because they're not, they need to be sufficiently hidden away from contaminants in the blood, notably bacteria and viruses, that they've evolved to be away, and therefore to have a different fueling mechanism. And what the fueling mechanism is glycolysis. They feed on sugar. Now, if you know anything about cancer, that's going to ring a bell. And so I had always believed the narrative that that we were doing things, often moral things, like anal sex or drinking or smoking or eating too much or going too much and being too idle in the sun, all these morally wrong things that get you cancer, right?
Right.
I always believe, I'm like you. I started this fully trusting the system. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, I didn't fully trust, but
at
trusted too
least.
much.
At
Yeah,
least the
far too
science.
much.
No, but at least the science. At least the
Right,
science,
right.
mutations, etc. But then I had that aha moment and said, well, hold on a second. What if I start comparing the characteristics of a stem cell and the characteristics of a cancer cell? And they're the same, basically. And there is a ton of literature that I didn't know of at the time that have been saying for about 20 years, saying, it's strange, you have all these stem cell cancer cells. Right? And mathematically, it's just impossible that you would have a normal cell that would be, systematically in 5% of Americans, they always find their way to building back a stem cell. That makes no sense. Statistically, the chances of you contaminating a stem cell with vaccine, that's quite more probable. And of course, if you inject a bolus, imagine marbles going through a maze, as you see on those videos on the internet. If you send one marble, it's going to go down, hit one here, one there, etc. There's a little chance it's going to go on this island on the side that's secluded. But if you throw 1 million marbles down, some marbles are going to go on that little island on the side for sure, because the probabilities are there, and that's where the bolus theory plays in two areas. One aspect is the cardiovascular damage that's done to your endothelium, both in the cardiovascular, the arteries, basically the heart, the lungs, the arteries, and in the capillaries in your organs. That's the that's the immune system doing the harm. And on the genetic side, it's the fact that these the bolus, this swarm of particles, is going to find its way to these hidden away stem cells, and they're going to contaminate them. And that that stem cells don't have the solution to decontaminate, because if it did, it would have passed it along to normal cells. Every single normal cell has emerged from a stem cell. So if you have a feature that works, nature is wonderful, and it would have used it, and it hasn't. So I'm proposing the first part of my theory, all the dominoes, all is proven, etc. The cancer bit is a bit more hypothetical, but extremely solid and consistent in terms of all the ideas. Now, what's really important to understand is that once you've understood the problem with mRNA and with COVID vaccines, you extrapolate and say, hold on a minute. If one of those particles of pseudo, attenuated virus vaccines, for example, if it penetrates into a cell, it's going to do something similar. It's not as advanced, a different technology to do it, but fundamentally, the immune system is agnostic. It's going to consider the cell is contaminated, and it's going to kill it, which means that all the vaccines should have the same effects. And when you do the work, and I spent 2 weeks checking out every single vaccines for case reports of people saying, have you had cancer with them, or have you had bullous pemphigoid? Have you had myocarditis? Have you had thrombosis? All of them. And in my book, I have a table where I list case reports after case reports for every single one of the vaccines. In other words,
I'd like to, Mark, before we get into sort of that next segment, which I'm very interested in getting to, I just wanted to ask you one question as it pertains to what you were just describing, which is you go into detail about this issue of physical administration. It's very compelling. But we've also discussed previously on this program the other vectors of harm, I guess you could say, for example, mRNA, the spike protein itself, but just the question of mRNA, the lipid nanoparticle being a source of danger. And then there's the issue of plasmid DNA contamination. So I just want to ask, does your theory account for some of that stuff, or does it sort of set that stuff aside for the moment?
Do you realize they're not poison compared to the antigen and the T cell attacking a cell. There is nothing more poisonous than a virus. It keeps, all the people who have been talking about NLPs or even circulating spike protein don't understand what a vaccine is. A vaccine is a laser beam pointing at a cell and telling the immune system to kill it. What can be more poisonous than that? Nothing. Not even endotoxins are as dangerous as that. Yeah, that's what people don't understand. So you're injecting poison, and then they're saying, oh, there's more poison to it. It's typically going to be less poisonous. It doesn't change none of this changes the Mithridates conundrum. Okay, you can take arsenic or whatever poison, if it's in small dose and it's ingested in a way that's progressive, and your body is going to deal with like a bulletproof vest. So it's going to share it across. It's going to filter it as much as it can with its liver and spleen, etc. Whatever the poison is, it's going to deal with it. It's when the dose paradigm is shifted and you get this magnifying glass effect. Let's be clear. Your life is destroyed within 50 seconds. This is all happening the first blood cycle, when your bolus is not diluted yet, and it goes and slams your thing. So the circulating spike protein, I'm sorry to ask these doctors who've been talking about it, they need to go back to basic immunology. Okay, antibodies work day in, day out on all proteins, foreign proteins, and we know that people have tons of them. They bind. Circulating spike protein is non-existent post JAB2. Why? Because the T cells are so effective. They're trained, and therefore they destroy the cells before any large quantity, detectable quantity of spike is actually produced. Now, some people, I wrote an article recently, some people have found traces of spike 3 years down the road. And I have a theory about that. And the theory is these people have been taking antibodies. They've been taking anti-SPAC antibodies. And if you have that, your body would create anti-SPAC antibodies, and those anti-SPAC antibodies would react to your spike tests. So this is all, I've falsified every single one of those theories. It's falsifiable because that's why the freedom movement is not credible, because the rest of the world is saying, well, you're telling us it's poison, but we have millions of billions of people who are healthy. It's not credible. If it's poison, it's poison. It's harmful. It's this dichotomy between in some cases, some people are harmed, some people aren't. If you don't solve this, you can't say it's spike protein. I mean, billions of people have had circulating spike protein and don't have problems. And by the way, all the signs, if you observe the autopsies and if you observe the types of illnesses people have, are not in line with any of these. What you always have is concentrated T cell attacks with some traces of spike, because they're attacking the plant that's producing spike, so they're spike. But you're never seeing systemic wide. If you're releasing spike protein throughout the body, you would have it everywhere, and that's not what you're seeing. You're seeing areas that are concentrated, this magnifying glass effect. The plasmid DNA that my friend Kevin McKernan has discovered is a different beast. I'm not concerned by what he's concerned, because because they have forgotten what a stem cell is. Well, first of all, they don't consider that, they consider that for all cells, and all cells that have what is called MHC, which are the receptors that presents the contaminants to the immune system, if you will. All of those cells get destroyed. So if you have a contaminant, it's irrelevant. It's only relevant for the surviving cells, 3 months, 6 months, 2 years down the road. If you have cancer or if you have a genetic disorder, that's what we're talking about. And that can only happen with stem cells. But stem cells are dividing cells. They divide and divide and divide. And in that case, the nucleus is dissolved. And that's a major problem. I don't understand. Again, I haven't seen any theory about it, but it seems to me quite obvious that if you start putting contaminants, lipid nanoparticles can play a role here, proteins, DNA can play a role. If you have these chromatids that are separating to create two cells, the nucleus is gone. So you're going to have two new nuclei who are going to form, right, and reform around these newly formed chromosomes. But normally the environment is pristine. It's like, it's like one of those data center white cells, completely pristine. Here, you're going to have things that are going to start binding. They're not supposed to be there. So you're going to have spike protein. You're going to have DNA contaminants that are going to start binding. You're going to have lipid nanoparticles potentially stopping, one chromosome from getting to the other side. And so there's another part of my theory on the genetic side, which is that vaccines are causing genetic disorders. And here you have you have Down syndrome, you have all the genetic disorders you can get. Either you have an extra chromosome, or you're missing a chromosome, or a broken chromosome, or yeah.
Yeah, so we're kind of down to our last 10 minutes. You have so much information that it's like
Yeah, sorry.
you won't be able to get. No, it's quite all right. I mean, this is robust, and I direct people to your work, so they can follow up with all this fascinating stuff that you're describing. But I would love for you to follow up on a comment I know you made in your previous Substack, where you said something to the effect of every mass vaccination event was a mass injury event. And I find that amazing in terms of, for example, most people I come across have never heard of, for example, the Qatar event, where there was contaminated polio vaccines, et cetera, et cetera. You can look into it. But, the fact is, well, we all know as a simple matter of fact that manufacturing on a mass scale can produce a level of injury. They're defective products, right? You produce 1 million lollipops, and then somehow a couple lollipops come out incomplete, or
Yeah,
tire recalls.
I have a different theory here. First of all, I come from the manufacturing world. I know these guys are very serious about it. And again, you would need the poison to be more poisonous, and it's impossible. Okay, so when I said all vaccination campaign have shown problems, it's because you're seeing it when you're doing it. When you're repeating a flawed procedure, and over time, over generations, it's sort of noise. It's sort of they dust it off and say it's fate. Oh, this poor kid who died 3 days after his vaccine, sudden infant death syndrome. Ooh, surprise!
Right,
Or yeah, bad luck. Whatever. It's all Oh, he had cancer. Oh, he had that. But it's sort of meshed into the thread of our lives. One, when you start injecting a whole generation, or a whole cohort together, or the entire age pyramid like they did with COVID, and there is this systemic flaw in the injection procedure that I'm describing, it's going to show. Because imagine, I consider that about 1 shot out of 20 is seriously damaging. And 1 shot out of 100 is clinically damaging, right? So 1 shot of 20 can give you Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, and all sorts of things. 1 shot at 100 can kill you. Okay? They don't kill you each time. If you're young, your body heals. Thank God our bodies are wonderful machines. If our bodies wasn't capable of healing, we would kill everybody. Let's be clear. It's because our bodies know how to deal with stuff that it seems innocuous. but we're hitting everybody 100%. We're harming 5%, and we're seriously maiming 1%. And so if you go to the 1976 swine flu virus, you had problems. If you go to the Gulf War veterans, Gulf War soldiers injection, you had all these people who were sick even before going to war. If you take the anthrax injection in the U.S. military, was a disaster. They should have known. If they don't know, I mean, I don't know who's hiding it. And if you look at even in the Philippines, the dengue vaccine with children had in 2016 was also the same disaster.
It's so
Well,
upsetting, honestly, as you speak, that it's like there's so many examples, and they've just tried to pass this on as this unquestionable thing. It's like, no, the history of the thing you're describing is the opposite of how you describe it. There's necessarily these problems, and you're just saying it's just smooth sailing. It's something
yeah.
we perfected. Don't even worry one little bit about it, is what we've been
Now,
told.
the thing, once you understand that this is not specific to mRNA, that HPV are, the measles, the MMR, the yellow fever, the almost all vaccines can harm. You look around and you say, well, where are they? And you see the explosion of autism, and you see the explosion of cancer, and you see the explosion of obesity. Now, if we have a little time, I want to give hope to people, because I did this to understand. So to stop it, we can easily stop. It's very easy to fix. Okay, first of all, we don't need to inject that many, but that's a different battle. But it's very easy to fix the problem. This dosage shift, this problem of intravenous injection. So that's one thing. But the part I dug into a lot was, how can we fix this? And can we fix this? There are some cases, if you're dead, or if you're, an entire organ is gone, you can't rebuild that. But many people are harmed in a way that you can actually heal, or you can improve greatly. And I first looked into the leading edge stem cell therapies, etc. Very quickly got scared. First of all, too expensive, not useful to help out billions of people that have been harmed across the globe in the past 40 years. And the way you do that is by stimulating your own stem cells. The only remedy to this is your own body fixing you, right? It's the only way. Nobody else, the drugs, whatever drugs are, what they do is they trigger your body to repair itself. And the best way, that has the most literature, is oxygen therapy. Oxygen therapy stimulates stem cells. Remember, stem cells are hidden away from oxygen. And if they get too much oxygen, notably when you run, that's why they trigger stem cell multiplication. Not crazy one like in cancer, just enough to go and repair yourself. That's why high intensity sports is so good for your health. It's not because sports, it's not sports that's good for your health. It's the fact that you're triggering stem cells that go on to repair you. And women who've carried life, who are pregnant, actually often are repaired by the stem cell of their fetus. It's beautiful. It's called microchimerism. So we know it works. And so in my book, I talk about oxygen therapy at length to repair and to heal and cure people with a variety of symptoms. It works extremely well for anything microperforation related. Basically, mending your capillaries. So myocarditis, pericarditis, neurodegenerative disease, neuropathies, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, SLA, ALS, SLA is in French.
Right. Sure.
endometriosis, leaky gut, Crohn's disease, all of those. What it does, it takes time, right? Because it's
Mark, I'm
once
really
at a
sorry to
time.
cut you off. We're actually running out of time.
No,
Like
sorry. Anyhow,
well, this
sorry.
is incredible work that you've done. It's been incredible to have you as a guest. I really encourage the listeners to track down your book. Tell us the name of your book, please.
My book is called The Needle's Secret: Unraveling the Mystery of Vaccine Harm and the Bolus Theory Revolution. It's
The
available on
Needle
Amazon.
Okay, The
The
Needle's
Needle's
Secret. And how
Secret.
do people find you on Twitter?
They can find me with my name or with the Bolus Theory series called
Right,
Bolus.
Marc with a C.
Marc with a C.
Girardot.
Girardot with 2 R's. R-A-R. But type the Bolus Theory, and you'll find my Substack.
Bolus, B-O-L-U-S. Bolus.
Exactly.
So please subscribe to this man's Substack, follow him on Twitter, buy the book, and we commend you for this incredible work that you've done, and your diligence and your passion around the subject. We're definitely going to need you moving forward in terms of trying to sort out all this stuff that's been imposed on us and all these wrong ideas that have gone unquestioned for so long.
Yeah, it's time to fix that. It's really high time to fix this.
Well, it's been my pleasure, Marc, and congratulations on everything, and looking forward to talking with you again sometime soon.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for hosting me. I love your music theme, by the way. Love it.
Oh, thank you so much. Yeah, tell a friend in France about it. I'd appreciate it.
Very talented.
Thank you so much, my friend. Well, you're doing an unbelievable job, and just really excited that we have new ideas to consider as of today, which is really a great thing when you get new ideas floating around in your head that you can think about. But have a great day. My best regards to your family, and keep up all the great work, my friend.
Thank you so much. Take care.
You too.
With open arms towards the sun, you feel the warmth of the rays, and then you know you're alive, and you don't have to be afraid of anything, 'cause you know the truth, and the truth is love. Yes, it is. Wasn't what they said to you, or anything that you learn from a book or from the news. It's not like that, 'cause it's a thing. It is something that you do. Doop 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 doo. Doop 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 doo. Doop 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 doo. Dib-bom baby did long. Doop 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 doo. Doop 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 doo. Doop 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 doo. Dib-bom baby did love's the highest truth. Nothing could be higher than love, my friend. Love's the deepest truth. Nothing could be deeper than love, my friend. When you stop and you take the time just to think about your life, you'll recall the ones you love and the ones who were always there for you. Better thank those friends better. You better make amends, go and tell them now, yeah. Tell them what they mean to you. Doop 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 doo. Doop 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 doo. Doop 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 doo. Dib-bom baby did love. Doop 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 doo. Doop 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 doo. Doop 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 doo. Dib-bom baby did love.